you said you had watched this recently, and it sort of inspired you to want to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it before, so it's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
And then of
Well,
course I just watched it again. I was like, well, let's go and talk about it.
well, I had watched it, I guess, about a year ago, and I wasn't so sure I wanted to watch it again so soon because I was
Yeah.
afraid I wouldn't enjoy it. But I have to admit, it always lures me in, and I think the reason is because it's just such an entertaining film.
Yeah.
You know, it's similar in a way to The Exorcist and The Omen in that it creates an environment which is actually a pleasant, almost a romantic vision of life. And then it introduces the horror element.
Yeah.
And so the horror element is that much more effective because it's against the background of this sort of wonderful, pleasant existence, these charming people. You look at Rosemary and Guy, young couple, attractive, intelligent. Guy apparently isn't a talented actor. They're enjoying a little bit of financial success because of his TV commercials. They're moving to this exclusive place in Manhattan, and a good chunk of the movie is this wonderful adventure of following them as they're sort of setting themselves up in this new life. The future looks so bright, right? Anyway, I think that's an important part of the success of all three of those movies, the Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, and The Omen, is that it starts with these attractive young couples seemingly entering into a new life where they're going to be successful and happy, and their kid and Satan somehow fucks them up.
Yeah.
Satan either gets into their kid or their kid turns out to be
Be
Satan.
Satan, yeah.
And I don't think these stories would work if it was like working class people like me, because that environment isn't attractive to people. We like the scenes in Rosemary's Baby where she's walking along all those streets in Manhattan, looking at like Berghoff Goodman, looking at the nativity displays,
Yeah.
all that it feels like the center of the world. That's a much more interesting environment to put a horror story like this than, someplace out in Staten Island or Queens.
Right.
So I think that's an important part of the success of this movie and the reason why it's so rewatchable. He also gets into that feeling that almost every person when they're young must have when they first move into a new place is, who do you trust? How do you get along with your neighbors? Can you trust these old people?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
if you're a young person and you're taking a step like that and you're moving into a new apartment, you always have old folks that are trying to help you and trying to give you the benefit of their experience. And obviously, in this case, it doesn't work out too well. But that's something that any person, has experienced at some point in their lives, where they have to wonder how much they should allow this person to be an advisor. How much should they? And actually, the guy and Rosemary have two, right? They have the Castavets, and they have Hutch.
Yeah.
They should have listened to Hutch,
Right.
but
For me, watching this or all these other old movies like that New York, that for some reason I think I should have been born in New York. Like that's like I've been like I guess a fan of it ever since. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Always liked the look of it. And
There's something about the way they shot New York in the 70s, the 60s and the 70s.
yeah.
It never looked more New Yorkish. I mean,
Right.
that sort of defined New York. And a lot of times it was really just taking the cameras out and shooting what was there. I think that was largely true of The French Connection, which I think is a film you watched recently,
Yep.
fairly recently. The idea was, and I wish filmmakers nowadays still followed this rule, you can add so much to your film just by taking your cameras out and seeing what's there. Take
Yeah.
advantage of what's already there. Don't try to fake it. And of course, in this movie, one of the advantages is we're never really sure what exactly happened.
Yeah, you don't know.
You don't know, right? I mean, you can't. I mean, obviously they were a devil's cult, that much,
Yeah.
or a satanic cult. But whether or not they have the powers that they think they have, that's really left to could all be coincidence.
Yeah, I kind of like the way that the rape scene was basically a dream. So you're like, okay, did it happen that way? Did it not happen that way? You know what I'm saying?
Right? There's no way to know.
Was it the drugs and the pudding that made her see Satan, or you know?
And I think that the secret of some of the best supernatural stories and ghost stories, and it's true, I think, even of The Exorcist, as extreme as The Exorcist is, it could be read as being something that really is just being seen from a particular point of view. Like, for
Right.
instance, early in The Exorcist, we do actually get to see Father Damien's dreams. And later in the film, when those manifestations are occurring that are so extreme with the girl's head spinning and things like that,
Hmm.
we're seeing it from his point of view, right? So
Yeah.
it could be his hallucination. I mean, we assume it's his hallucination when he sees his mother in the bed, right?
Right. Yeah.
So in this case, with Rosemary's Baby, it's possible that this is all just uh, the ultimate conclusions that she comes to are the result of her postpartum hysteria of some kind. The message to women really in this movie is you can't trust men.
Okay, yeah, that was
Yeah,
another thing. And when I was watching it again today, was how husbands treat their wives and how society treats women, and she does that transformation of cutting her hair off.
right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like now is she trying to be more like a man? Is she trying to move into like that sort of empowering status? But then you have all these people around her that are just constantly beating her down.
Right. Everybody has more control over her than she has over herself. And all the men, even when they appear to be deferring to her, they're sort of giving her her opinion. Like,
Yeah,
for instance, when they're talking about the Pope and Roman Castevet, actually it's Minnie who says, "Oh, we're offending Rosemary because Rosemary's a Catholic."
yeah,
Right? And Roman says, you're not offended, or you're not a believer, or something like that. So in other words, the way he says it is, of course you're not, right?
yeah,
He's forcing the opinion on her. And all through the movie, there is that sort of passive aggressive way of pushing their ideas. I mean, Guy is a charmer, and he frequently manages to get around some difficult situations just by using humor. He deflects anger, like, for instance, when she wakes up and she has scratches on her, before she gets a chance to say, you raped me while I was knocked out.
he admits to it.
Right, and he focuses on his fingernails.
Yeah,
So, I know what you're going to be angry about. I trimmed them already.
yeah,
And of course, that's not what she's going to be angry about at all. So he very cleverly, he's a good actor, he manages to move things to something that he has an answer for. And he makes a joke out of it, right? And he's always making a joke out of it when she says, I thought I was being raped by some sort of devil or animal.
yeah,
And he says, thanks a lot. Uh, that sort of way of constantly deflecting with humor and not allowing the person to ever really express themselves. And he also uses the other trick that people like that use, which is to admit and apologize before the other person has a chance to complain.
yeah,
Like he does that whole business of bringing in the roses. I know I've been awful and blah, blah, blah. And of course, that's just a way of stopping her from expressing herself about how she feels about their relationship. So at every step along the way, she's dominated by the men. She's told how she should feel. She's told how she should think. When she begins to try to educate herself a little bit, they take the books away from her. Like Dr. Saperstein has one piece of advice to it.
yeah. Don't read
Don't read
books.
her
Yeah,
books. She gets a book from Hutch that basically tells her everything she needs to know, right? And the guy takes it away from her and throws it out. When she says a perfectly reasonable request, she says, I want to go to Dr. Hill because I don't know if I can trust this Epstein guy. And he says, I won't let you do it. Well, right?
yeah. But
It's
and
not
then when
fair to Dr. Saperstein.
yeah, and then when she does go to Dr. Hill, who for some reason I didn't realize till today was played by
Charles Grodin.
Charles Grodin.
First
uh,
film role, I believe.
yeah,
Yeah.
someone she thought she could trust. He also
Right.
not he's not part of the cult, but he as a man thinks, well, this woman's crazy. Let me call her husband.
And let's be honest. If we were in his position, we would probably do exactly the same thing, right? I mean, a woman you hardly know comes in and says that these devil worshippers want her baby.
Hmm.
You're aware that women do sometimes suffer psychological or emotional problems as a result of the whole flood of chemicals that are going through their body when they're pregnant and when they're about to give birth. And you're talking about a guy, Saperstein, what is he, an obstetrician, I guess?
Yeah.
Most well known in the city. So,
but I mean, it's just looking at it from her eyes, like somebody I thought I could trust, and
she's trapped, right? She's
I
absolutely
think
trapped.
that's the point where she just gave up.
You mentioned the business with the hair. And I always wondered, even as a child, why they put that in there. I couldn't believe that it was just an opportunity to give publicity to Vidal Sassoon.
Yeah.
They did use his involvement to generate some publicity. As a matter of fact, while they were shooting the movie, he came to Paramount Studios and they did a photo session of him cutting her hair. For some reason, they shot these photos on a prize fighting ring set.
Huh.
I don't know. Maybe that was the only set that was
Yeah.
open and available. Anyway, if you look at those photos, she already has that haircut. He's just sort of making believe like he's
Yeah.
Turns out she had that hairstyle before she started shooting the movie. She was wearing a wig during the
opening scenes. Okay.
So, but you start to think about it and you say, well, why did they do that? Why did they think, I mean, if she wore a wig, she could have wore the wig all through the movie, right?
Right.
So it didn't matter that Mia Farrow had decided to get that haircut. So why did they do that? Now, in the early part of the movie, she's wearing like pigtails and a very girlish look.
Yeah, she's still young and got a kid.
And then when she's pregnant with Satan's baby, she shows up and she looks like somebody that Charles Addams might have drawn, you know.
Yeah.
Got the haircut and she's got this terribly gaunt, pale face. You know, she's even skinnier than she normally is.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was going to ask you, if it was in the book that she had cut her hair.
Well, he says that she went for a Vidal Sassoon haircut, but they don't describe it to that specifically, as far as I can remember. So the question still remains, why such a short haircut? But I think that what it really is, she doesn't have control over anything in her life.
Right, yeah.
So she's exercising control in a very visible way by changing one part of her appearance. She knows she looks like a ghost. She knows she can't get out from under Guy or Dr. Saperstein or the Pope, for that matter.
Yeah.
Or Satan. So she's doing the one thing she can do to express herself.
Before she gets pregnant, she wears all white and blues, which is like Mother Mary collar. Yeah, Virgin Mary collars, and then
they clearly are doing things with color. Right?
Yeah.
The first time you see Minnie and Roman, they're in like whites and pinks and almost like Easter colors. But when they invite them over, Roman is almost entirely in red.
I believe so. Yeah.
So we have, for the first time in the movie, somebody wearing blood-like sanguine red. Which is, I don't think accidental. Right?
Yeah.
When Rosemary has been subdued, after they catch her and they sedate her, and after she's had the baby, and she's laying in bed and she wakes up, and they're coming in. I guess the woman that's taking care of her, Laura Louise.
Yeah.
Laura Louise calls them in, and as Dr. Saperstein and Guy are entering, Rosemary is saying, "Where's my baby?" And Dr. Saperstein is doing this.
Yeah.
In a movie that has at least 3 mentions of people who eat babies.
Eat babies, yeah.
It's signaling that he was off in another a part of the apartment having a meal.
Yeah.
And it is funny that it comes right at that moment where she says, "Where's my baby?" And he's wiping his mouth like he just ate it. So much more entertaining to go back to a movie like this, which I've gone back to probably 20 times in my life, to go back to a movie like this and consider all these different things, rather than just having a movie where the big attraction is somebody getting their head cut off or somebody disemboweled. How much can you really get out of that? And the funny thing is that that's pretty much what this movie led to. It was like the other movies felt they had to outdo this one.
Yeah.
But
the only blood in this one is when the woman, I guess, commits suicide at the beginning and jumped off of course, we know she was murdered, but
yeah, that's an interesting question too. I assume that Minnie and Roman are responsible for her death. Uh,
Yeah, I took it as maybe she was gonna be the carrier of the baby, and then they move in, so they
right.
maybe for
And
some.
they've had this problem before because
Yeah,
when Guy and Rosemary are first looking at the apartment and they're looking at uh, Mrs. Gardenia, Miss
hmm,
Gardenia. She's the woman that lived in that apartment before, and they're
yeah,
supposedly great friends of Minnie and Romans. So as they go into the apartment, she sees a little piece of her notebook, and it says something to the effect of, "It was all fun for a while, but I find I can no longer associate dot dot dot."
yeah,
Maybe she died right at that moment.
yeah,
It's like arg, right? That was just when they came, and of course, what it is, I find I can no longer associate myself with them, and she drags or has somebody drag the cabinet in front of the closet, which is the entrance to their apartment. So presumably they bumped her off one way or the other too, uh, and of course they're responsible for. I mean, if we assume that they are actually empowered with the supernatural force of some kind,
yeah,
uh, we assume that they were responsible for Hutch, Miss Gardenia, Terry, am I leaving it? And the guy going blind,
yeah.
the actor going blind. So that's pretty good, pretty good list of casualties,
Oh yeah.
but you don't see anything.
Nope.
The shock scenes in Rosemary's Baby pretty much limited to her being raped by the devil. That's probably the most explicit or shocking scene in the film. And
Right.
even that isn't really, I suppose in 1968,
That was
uh,
probably pretty terrifying.
that was probably pretty, and
It's
there were
kind
a
of
lot of people,
mundane, kind of mundane now.
oh, now it could be done on probably on network television, you know.
Yeah. Of course, I'd mentioned to you before when we were talking about it, how I was saying how I thought that scene was kind of comical. Her reaction to it, oh, this is really happening, and
Mhm.
and of course you mentioned, well, maybe because wait, yeah, I was like, well, maybe William Castle had a hand in some of the comedy, but
Possibly. I don't know how much he was involved. He's in the film.
yeah, yeah, but yeah,
He pops up for a cameo and
in the
behind,
phone booth.
right? But the whole film really is a comedy in a way,
Yeah, I was watching again today. I was just like, it's not laugh out loud funny,
right?
but it's sort of light. If you know
Yes,
what I'm saying, it's not like dark and dreary and you feel through most of it. You're just like, oh, okay.
it's a very pleasant type of evil person that we meet in this movie.
Of course,
Uh,
out of all the people, like the Minnie and Roman, the guy character for some reason I just didn't care for him. He was like the big asshole of the whole satanic group.
well, you could say that Minnie and Roman, they really believe in something, right? So
Right.
they're doing what they have to do to achieve this thing that they think is important.
Yeah, and guys just doing it for the money,
Guy is
for
just
the
an,
fame.
and the funny thing is, he says it. That's another thing in this movie. Very often, people say exactly the truth. They say it in a joking way, but it's the truth. Guy says on a couple of occasions how selfish he is. You know
Yeah.
how selfish he's been, and he attributes that to being an actor, and he's absorbed in his role, and he wants to get his career going and all that. But really, he's an amoral person. He's somebody who doesn't care about. I mean, when you stop and think about it, it's pretty shocking. A guy is willing to actually sell his wife
To a
and his
satanic
child.
cult. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty extraordinary. And we don't have to necessarily believe that it results in a satanic baby in order to believe that that may have happened. That he
Right.
may actually have made a deal with them. We never see the baby,
No.
and we only have Rosemary's word that there's something wrong with its eyes. Uh, so that could be a hallucination. You have that brief superimposition of the devil eyes that she
Hmm.
saw from her dream, but that isn't supposed to be the baby, presumably. That's,
Yeah.
you know. So we never see the baby. We don't know what it's supposed to look like. That was an intentional thing. Roman Polanski said that he was a little disappointed when he read the book that the, there wasn't any real manifestation of the devil, but I guess he realized that that is why it works. And that's why an
Hmm.
intelligent person can go back to this movie over and over and over again, because it isn't explicit in that way. All the films that came after, all the films that were influenced or inspired by it, always made it explicit. And that's why we
Yeah.
don't remember them, and we don't think as highly of them as this one, because it's left to one's imagination. And I'm not
Yep.
really one of those people that's always saying that you have to leave everything to the imagination.
Right. Yeah.
But I do think that there are some things that you can't portray in a movie without all the air going into the thing.
Hmm.
It's not like in the X-Files. You never really should have seen the aliens, you know.
Yeah.
That's as soon as that happens, it's like, oh, it's a guy in a suit. Right?
Hmm.
You know exactly how it's done. You know, the makeup, prosthetics, or nowadays it would be CGI, and that all the mystery is lost. Right, all the power of the thing is just sort of evaporates.
Yeah, I think if they would have shown some kind of puppet devil baby at the end of this movie, it would have destroyed it.
It would have been laughable, right?
Yeah.
And those things always age poorly, right? I
Hmm.
mean, to be honest, as much as I'm a great fan of admirer of Dick Smith's makeup, some of the effects work in The Exorcist hasn't aged that well.
Right. Yeah.
The head clearly looks like something that's spinning around on the top of a mannequin.
Right.
You know, it's not that we can't appreciate the cleverness of the people that did those effects. It's just that special effects are kind of like magic tricks. Once you've seen it,
Yeah.
the effect is lost, and then you spend all your time when you see it again, spend all your time trying to figure out where the seams are, how is it done, and that's not the effect you want to have when you're making a movie like this. You don't want people sitting there thinking, gee, I wonder how they did that.
Yeah.
You want people to be, the audience to be in the story, right? Completely emotionally involved in the story, not thinking about, you know, where the rods are for the monster's
Yeah.
arms or whatever.
Yeah. By not showing the devil baby, it's better because you can just imagine
Right.
what's in that crib.
Right. This isn't really a sad story ultimately. I mean, I think that one of the things that Ira Levin is trying to put across is the idea that even in the worst situation, even when you're dealing with the primary force of evil in the world, Satan, humanity will still come through, right?
Right. Yeah.
At the end, she still wants to be a mother to the kid, which is
Yeah.
a reassuring thing, I think, that even in the apocalypse, even when everything's going to hell, literally, mothers will still feel affection and concern for their children. And we all have mothers, so we should hope that that always remains true, right? Ira Levin didn't believe in the devils. At one point, he was considering having the menace in the story be aliens.
Right.
He figured alien impregnation is just as good as you know, a satanic impregnation. Unfortunately, they had already done something like that, and the Village of the Damned.
Right. Yeah.
About children who are, I guess, spawn of aliens or under the influence of aliens. So that wasn't, and I'm glad he didn't do that, because
Yeah.
I think with one thing, and I'm an atheist, I don't believe in the devil. I don't think he's a force in the world. I'm sorry that there are people that are so gullible that they believe that shit. But I have to admit, there's something inside of all of us that does sort of believe it. And when you do a movie like this and you do it effectively, that it's like an icy finger touching that part of you that never goes away. You always think that, well, maybe there is, you know, maybe there is a devil, maybe there is, could there be something to this? You know? And that's that when these movies are successful, it brings out that sort of animal side of us that's afraid of the unknowable, afraid of evil as a force, afraid of the darkness, you know.
Something I heard about this movie is the script was like basically the book.
It is very similar. I read the book many, many times over the years. I've read it so often that it's actually falling apart. This was a paperback that came out, I guess, in 1967. It was a tremendously popular book. I mean, I think they said it sold 4 million copies. But Roman Polanski wrote the screenplay for this. He did the screenplay adaptation. And he won an Oscar for it, actually. It was one of the 2 Oscars that Rosemary's Baby won that year. William Castle, who we have spoken about before,
yeah.
This was his one instance where he did something that wasn't gimmicky.
And yeah, I guess this was gonna bring him out of the B movie schlock, and
that was his plan, yeah.
Yeah. But then he couldn't direct it.
Yeah, well, I've heard different stories. Now, some people say that he mortgaged his house in order to buy the novel. He read it in galley form.
Yeah.
And then he scurried off to Robert Evans, who was running Paramount at the time, and said, this you must produce, and I want to direct. And Robert Evans said, no, this Roman Polanski guy will get him. Roman Polanski at the time was one of the most controversial and also one of the most influential directors on the scene. He had that special cachet because he was a foreign director. And that was right at the time in the New Hollywood when a lot of the filmmakers in the United States were looking to Europe for inspiration. It was the place where all the most interesting stuff was being done. So he became like a big deal. He had a couple of, he did Knife in the Water, which was, I guess, a Polish film. And he did the one with Catherine Deneuve, Repulsion, which was a British film, I guess. And he did Cul-de-sac, which I believe was a Donald Pleasance film. I think that was also British because I think Rosemary's Baby was his first American film.
Yeah.
By the time they got him, he was a hot property and, you know, world famous, and everybody was expecting a lot. Anyway, the reason why I mention all this is because William Castle has speculated that the reason why Roman Polanski kept the book so close to the novel was because it was the first time he was adapting a novel for the screen, and he maybe didn't realize he was allowed to go off on his own.
Yeah.
But I tend to think that Roman Polanski always, for all his other flaws, and there are many, and we won't go into all the stuff that could be said against him, he's certainly no fool, and he's certainly a brilliant director. And I think that he recognized in this book, because one of the qualities that Ira Levin always had in his books is conciseness. He knows exactly what elements have to be in the story in order to get the effect that he wants. Stephen King referred to him as the Swiss watchmaker of thriller writers. But anyway, that's William Castle's notion that Roman Polanski didn't realize that he could expand upon what Ira Levin wrote. I think that that Polanski just realized he didn't need to expand, that he had it all in there. Because the beautiful thing about Ira Levin's book, and it's true of the film as well, is that there are no extraneous details. Everything is called back to later, right? Every little detail that's raised at one point, it's brought up again in one way or another. There are like echoes of things all through the film, and that's all stuff that comes from the book. And Ruth Gordon had an extraordinary life. She was in silent movies. She was an extra in silent movies. And she went on and married Gosson Kanan. Gosson Kanan and her wrote Adam's Rib, which was, I think they won the Oscar for, or they were nominated. I think they won. That was one of the famous Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn comedies at the time. So she was an actress, and she was a successful screenwriter at a time when really there weren't that many successful women screenwriters.
Right.
And she had an acting career that lasted, I guess she was in her 80s when she died. And she apparently was going about her normal routine right up to the day she died.
Right. She was brilliant in this movie.
Really impressive.
Just seems like a real person.
Seemed like
it,
yes.
Yeah. Like I probably know people that
I know people like that.
Yeah.
It would have been very easy playing a character like that and trying to get the humor. It'd be very easy to turn it into a caricature.
Yeah.
But you see, a lot of the scenes, it's very casual and has a conversational quality to it that makes it work. And it makes it funnier because it sounds like a conversation with a real person. There's a lot of scenes in the movie because Roman Polanski apparently had this idea that he wanted to make sure that it could all be thought of as being Rosemary's hallucination or delusion. Right. So you see a lot of scenes where there are people in other rooms. We don't even see their faces. We see they're talking on the phone, or quite a few shots in that. There's a very famous shot where Rosemary looks in on the first night they're with Minnie and Roman, and she and Minnie are in the kitchen, and Minnie is cleaning out glass with some sort of implement, and Rosemary looks towards the living room and she just sees a little puff of smoke. Right? So they're sitting and they're talking about something, and we just see little smoke coming from their cigars and cigarettes. That almost reminds me of the little touch in Rear Window. where you just see a little pinpoint of light of
Hmm.
Raymond Burr's cigarette when he's sitting in his apartment. That's how we know he's in there.
Yeah.
But that's so important because you don't want a scene where you actually have Guy receive this proposition.
Right.
It
Yeah.
would have been very difficult to stage that in a convincing way. It has to be done off screen. But also you want to do it so that we don't know. It has to be from Rosemary's point of view, right? So we can have a scene where Roman is leaning over and saying, Guy, I have a little proposal for you, because that would take all the suspense out of the movie. That has to be left to the end.
And I believe the only other Polanski film I've seen is some vampire comedy that he wrote
Fearless
or
Vampire
directed.
Killers.
Yeah, yeah. But so, and two different directing styles is from what I remember from the other vampire movie.
Well, Fearless Vampire Killers was meant to be like a parody of the Hammer films, which were very
Hmm.
popular at that time. So it's probably not representative of Roman Polanski's
Yeah.
best work.
Yeah.
It's an interesting film. I tend to dislike the Roman Polanski movies that Roman Polanski appears in himself.
Yeah.
I don't think he's a particularly skilled comedian. Anyway, Repulsion is an excellent film, and that's a very disturbing film. So that's one that you should seek out. Cul-de-sac, I thought was a very interesting film. He did another movie called The Tenant that he appeared in, and maybe I'll make an exception with The Tenant. That's one film that I think is worth seeing, even though he's the star of it. I mean, he did Chinatown. So I guess Rosemary's Baby and Chinatown, those are the films, that he'll probably be remembered for. You could debate whether or not this really is a horror movie. I would say it is. I'd say it's a particular type of horror movie.
Yeah.
That is very subtle, and it's probably in the long run more effective than more explicit horror movies.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I can't think of any really explicit horror movie that I like as much as this. This doesn't have any real violence. Doesn't even have the threat of violence. It was only in this time that I watched it that I finally understood what Laura Louise is saying at the end, when Rosemary starts saying, "Oh God, oh God," and she says, "Shut up about your God. We'll kill you, milk or not."
Yeah.
I never heard her say that before. I never heard that part where she says, "We'll kill you." That is probably the only instance in the movie where they actually have
Threaten
a threat.
her. Yeah.
And of course, she's quickly shut up. She's quickly put down by Roman and Minnie. They push her out of the way. She's the only one that doesn't have the sense to realize that they want to win Rosemary over to be the child's mother. But that's the only explicit threat of death in the movie.
We could make a contrast to Rosemary and what she was going through and Mia Farrow, because she was married to one of our favorite people,
Yes,
Frank Sinatra at the time.
Yes.
He wanted
another man dominating.
Yeah, he wanted her to, you come do my movie, The Detective, or you divorce me. And of course, she stood her ground and decided to stay on what I guess was the better movie.
Yeah, well, apparently Roman Polanski and William Castle, I guess, convinced her that this is much better for your career than the Detective, and they sure turned out to be right on that. Who ended up with her part, I wonder?
I can't remember.
Now, The Detective, isn't that the thing that John McClane, right?
McClane, yeah.
John McClane, yes, from Die Hard.
Yeah.
But Bruce Willis ended up playing the part that Frank Sinatra
should have played.
First refusal on.
Yeah.
Frank Sinatra wasn't so crazy that he would actually try to play an action. I guess at that point he was probably in his 70s, right?
Probably, yeah.
So but yeah, it's an interesting thing that you have a movie about a woman who is dominated by her husband, by her doctor, by the Pope.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is about repression and keeping her down, and trying to make her happy to be kept down, trying to make her content to be dominated by everybody. And while she's making the movie, she's got Frank Sinatra saying, "You do it my way." He's the my way guy.
Right, yeah. So Patty Duke auditioned for the role and didn't get to play it. Lost it out to Mia Farrow, but she did come back in the sequel.
That's right, yes.
Which I didn't get a chance to rewatch, and I don't really remember a lot about it.
It's not.
But I'm assuming it's not as good. Was it made for TV, or was it a?
It was made for TV. It might have received some theatrical release in Europe. It was done several years after Rosemary's Baby.
76.
Yeah. But I think it was done because the ratings for the TV screening of Rosemary's Baby were so high that they said, we got to do something to follow this up. And yeah, it is funny that Patty Duke came along for the second time. Ruth Gordon shows up in that.
Oh, does she? Okay.
You know, I have great respect for her. I think she's terrific, but I sort of wish she hadn't. Sidney Blackmere, who plays Roman, I think he might have been dead by that time. So he's replaced by, I guess, Ray Milland. And Ray Milland was available for anything. So
Yeah.
I actually read Ira Levin's sequel novel, which Look What's Happened to Rosemary's Baby is not based on. Because he wrote his novel later. And I got a hardcover copy of it because I was so eager to. I was such a fan of the original book.
Right.
It wasn't really very good, unfortunately. I think he probably at that point had pretty much peaked. I think he has Andrew or / Adrian as the leader of some sort of like a New Age cult or something like that. I forget the exact specifics of it. But it didn't really, and it also, interesting thing about the novel, spoilers for anybody who has gotten this far.
Yeah.
We've already given away a lot, but for Son of Rosemary, he suggests in the final chapter that the whole thing was a dream. He has Rosemary waking up in the apartment with Guy, and the whole business about her pregnancy and the devil cult is assumed to be a dream that she had, including right up to the events of that novel, Son of Rosemary. So that seemed to be a trick that was pretty popular back then. I know.
Yeah, it just seems like a cheap ending. Like, oh, I can't end this movie or
Well,
my script or my book. Oh, we'll just make it a dream.
yeah, the book, the sequel book isn't very good, and the sequel TV movie, it's not very good. Didn't see the TV series that NBC made fairly recently.
I didn't watch it either.
Yeah, I didn't see very good reviews of that. I don't really know what they were thinking, why they thought that they could really do better than the original. You know,
Yeah.
it's just not the sort of thing you can really improve on. You know.
Well, everybody thinks they can do better than the original. That's why we have so many remakes now.
But I mean, when the guy who came up with the thing can't do it better,
Yeah.
then why would you think, you know, you weren't even able to come up with the first one? Hey, you're going to come along and Ira Levin wrote 2 more books that I guess were big hits. He wrote The Stepford Wives, which is similar to Rosemary's Baby, and made a very good film, from not as good as Rosemary's Baby, but a very solid film. And also Boys from Brazil, which is a movie I enjoy, but it's not a very good movie. You know, it's like Ira Levin decided he was going to do the equivalent of They Saved Hitler's Brain. You know, but it's an entertaining watch. You get to see people like Gregory Peck and Laurence Olivier in a fight to the death with Doberman pincers attacking them, and so that's fun. But Rosemary's Baby, I guess, is the thing that Ira Levin will always be remembered for. Ira Levin's son was on a podcast recently that I heard, and he said that for a brief time, Ira Levin was living in an apartment an apartment building in a duplex on the ground floor, and the only other tenant in the building was Eleanor Roosevelt.
Really?
And Eleanor Roosevelt owned the building with somebody else. How Ira Levin managed to get in there, I don't know. But at a certain point, Eleanor decided that she wanted the ground floor as well. And so apparently Ira Levin's son has in his possession letters from Eleanor Roosevelt that sort of gently, nicely saying, it would be so nice if you weren't here.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say that Eleanor Roosevelt was going to try to use satanic cults to run out the building.
Well, that was, I think, why Ira Levin's son, I forget his name, but he was suggesting that some of those scenes where they're having the gathering of these this international gathering of people at the end, all those Satanists from all over the world, that was sort of inspired by the things that he witnessed when Eleanor Roosevelt was living there, because she lived there until the end of her life, and apparently foreign dignitaries would frequently come, so the place had a lot of important people going in and out of it. So the suggestion is She wasn't quite Minnie Castevet, but she lived in a sort of environment that was similar to what the Castevets are living in. She was sort of the center of this sort of international, world. You probably know this, but the voice that Rosemary speaks to when she calls the actor that's gone blind, do you recognize him?
No, I didn't.
It's Tony Curtis.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Polanski got Curtis to do it because he knew that Mia Farrow would recognize the voice, but she wouldn't be able to place it, which turned out to be the truth. And the sort of, who is this that I'm talking to quality helps the performance in the scene.
Oh, yeah.
I have to hang up now. I just wanted to know if there'd been any improvement.
No, there isn't. It was nice of you to call by.
Definitely strong recommendation for Rosemary's Baby. It's a film that really I relish every time I watch it as something new to enjoy and appreciate.
Yeah, it didn't feel dated at all.
No, if it's dated in just the right way.
Yeah,
It's this type of dating that I like.
All right, so it's a good episode. Until next week, everybody, thanks for listening.